Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. On this week's video, we're continuing our ongoing series entitled The QME's Financial Impact, and this is session 6 in our new series. Now, the purpose of this new series entitled The QME's Financial Impact is to shed some light on how the QME's opinions and conclusions that are contained within the body of the QME report, how those opinions and conclusions impact the parties, and specifically how the opinions and conclusions impact, number one, the financial condition of the examinee, and number two, how the QME's opinions and conclusions impact the workers' compensation system as a whole in the state of California. And this is a fascinating discussion because many times as qualified medical evaluators, we give no thought whatsoever to the impact of our opinions and conclusions. And I find that without a clear understanding as to how the opinions and conclusions ripple throughout the system, we sometimes become a bit nonchalant and a bit cavalier in our medical decision making. Well, it seems that this cavalier and nonchalant medical decision making of qualified medical evaluators has contributed largely, or perhaps I could say has largely contributed, to a poor condition of the California's workers' compensation system compared to other states in the nation. And in this program, we focus largely on two recent studies that have shed some light, some fascinating light, on the debilitated condition of California's workers' compensation system. And many of these problems can be traced directly to cavalier and nonchalant medical decision making on the part of the qualified medical evaluator. So the purpose of this program is to let you know that your opinions and conclusions that you offer in your report do impact the system. They do matter. They do count. They are contributing to either an improvement in the condition of the examinee and the workers' compensation system, or they're contributing to a deterioration of the condition of the examinee and the workers' compensation system as a whole here in the state of California. And we spent the better part of 3 entire sessions in this series talking about your AOE-COE determination. And just to reiterate the philosophy of that session, of those sessions and that discussion, your AOE-COE determination is absolutely critical. The AOE-COE determination is the barrier through which an examinee must pass in order to obtain workers' compensation benefits. Now, for those examinees who qualify and who deserve workers' compensation benefits, it's important that you provide an accurate and correct determination to approve workers' compensation benefits. In other words, your opinion for an industrial injury is absolutely critical, and it's essential that that opinion be accurate so that examinees who truly qualify for workers' compensation benefits can be provided those benefits. Now, similarly, as discussed in both the WCIRB and the RAND studies, we're getting a glut of examinees who do not qualify for a workers' compensation system. Now, this has nothing to do with the qualified medical evaluator. It seems that there's a system in place that is providing a steady flow of examinees coming to the qualified medical evaluation under Labor Code 4060 for the compensability evaluation. And for these examinees, it's important to recognize what is the situation that brings them to the qualified medical evaluation. And then once you have that realization as to why they're there, it's critical that your AOE-COE determination be accurate. And for those examinees who do not qualify for workers' compensation benefits, meaning they did not suffer a bona fide incident of injury arising out of or occurring in the course of their employment, it's critical that your AOE COE determination be accurate and be correct so that these examinees are not falsely provided workers' compensation benefits when they don't qualify for such benefits. In this way, your opinions and conclusions can positively impact the financial condition of the examinee when the examinee qualifies for workers' compensation benefits, and your opinions and conclusions can positively impact the workers' compensation system as a whole in the state of California when the examinee does not qualify for workers' compensation benefits. And we talked about an exact science that you can use, that you can rely on, that you can put your faith, confidence, and belief in with your next 100 examinees in arriving at a correct, truthful, and accurate AOE COE determination. Okay? So it's critical that your AOE COE determination provide benefits to those examinees that qualify for those and denies benefits to those examinees who do not qualify for those benefits. Now, in today's discussion, I want to talk to you about how the QME's opinions and conclusions on permanent impairment impact the examinee and impact the workers' compensation system as a whole in the state of California. And like our discussion on AOE COE, we're striving for opinions and conclusions on permanent impairment that are accurate, that are actual, that are correct. I'm going to help you today in arriving at your permanent impairment conclusion for your examinee. I'm going to help you to arrive at a permanent impairment rating for those examinees who qualify for a permanent impairment rating that's accurate. And it seems that nonchalant and cavalier permanent impairment ratings offered by primary treating physicians and qualified medical evaluators is literally crippling the workers' compensation system here in California. So it's essential that your permanent impairment ratings be accurate. I'm going to help you establish a system for arriving at accurate permanent impairment ratings in today's discussion. So that's where we're going today. For today, we have a couple of references. I've provided you links to a couple of cases that we're going to be reviewing, the Moten case and the Torres case, and those are provided in your materials. So I'm going to give you a minute to go ahead and download those cases, and then also I want you to go ahead and grab your AMA guides, because I have a couple of references from the AMA guides, and I want you to be able to lay your own eyes on these references so that you know that I'm not just making up this stuff, that everything that we're talking about in these programs is supported by valid references, credible references. Today, we're going to reference no less an authority than the AMA guides in illustrating the principles on permanent impairment that I want to share with you today. So I'll give you a minute to go ahead and assemble your course materials for today's discussion, and I look forward to being back with you here in just a very few moments as we continue our ongoing series entitled The QME's Financial Impact. So I'll be back with you here in just a very few moments. Okay, I'm back with you now, and I have my references for today's discussion. I hope you have taken a moment to assemble those as well. I have some references today that I'm sure are just going to blow your mind with the principles espoused by these references. And I have a unique reference that I'm not sure all of you out there have. Some of you may have this book. This is the Master the AMA Guides. It's a companion text that goes with the AMA guides. And I'm not sure how many of you have this, but I do have a reference from this particular book that supports some of the principles that we'll be talking about today. Okay? So let's pick up where we left off. In this series entitled The QME's Financial Impact, we're basing largely our discussion on two studies. One is the 2017 WCIRB study, which is entitled The State of the System, State of the Workers' Compensation System. And then the second study is another 2017 study from the RAND Corporation. And it's these two studies upon which most of our arguments and discussions in this series are based. So I want to continue today with a couple of references from the WCIRB study. And we've reviewed these quotations from the WCIRB study previously. And I want to reiterate the references from that study today that refer to permanent impairment. Today's discussion is about accuracy in permanent impairment ratings. So I'm going to reiterate the statistics from that study that relate to permanent impairment only, okay? So referring to the WCIRB study, the WCIRB study tells us that California continues to have the highest premiums for workers' compensation insurance coverage in the nation. Now, premiums are what employers pay to insure their employees. So in California, the insurance premium rates are the highest in the country. In other words, California ranks last in terms of the cost, what it takes to insure, the cost that it takes to insure employees. California is in last place, 50 out of 50 states. Now, the WCIRB study cites 4 reasons for this. And I want to start by giving you reasons 2 through 4, and I'm going to hold back reason number 1 for dramatic effect, okay? But reasons 2 through 4 relate directly to the work that we do as qualified medical evaluators. So, reason number 2 for California having the highest premium rates in the country has to do with high medical costs per claim. California has extremely high costs in delivering medical care on a claim-by-claim basis. Reason number 3 is a more prolonged pattern of medical treatments. California seems to have a more prolonged pattern of medical treatments associated with every single claim than other states in the nation. This has to do with the work that we do as qualified medical evaluators, because this is referring to examinees who are not being declared permanent and stationary. They're not being given an MMI determination, a maximum medical improvement determination, and medical care is going on and on and on in what they refer to as a prolonged pattern of medical treatments. Well, those are reasons 2 and number 3. Reason number 1 that California has the highest insurance premiums in the country is because of a high frequency of permanent disability claims. It seems that in California, more so than any other single state in the entire nation, examinees go on to receive permanent disability awards. It seems that in California, no one recovers to a pre-injury condition and goes on to return to the pre-injury level of function. Despite a prolonged pattern of medical treatments, which is otherwise designed to get examinees well, and despite high medical costs per claim, these examinees have a high frequency of going on to receive a permanent disability award, which emanates from a permanent impairment rating from the qualified medical evaluator. Isn't that a conundrum? You would think that in the presence of excess medical treatment, wouldn't you expect examinees to get well? Wouldn't you expect examinees provided a prolonged pattern of medical treatment, wouldn't you expect examinees to recover to a pre-injury condition? I mean, what is the purpose of the medical treatment? The purpose of the medical treatment is to resolve the injury, is to return the examinee to pre-injury level of function, is to allow the examinee to fully recover from the effects of the industrial injury. But despite expensive, copious, and prolonged medical treatment, which is expensive, it seems that the medical treatment is not helping. It's not working, because examinees in California go on to receive permanent disability through a permanent impairment award provided by the qualified medical evaluator. So you might start this argument by saying, why even render medical treatment in the first place? If the examinees are going to go on to get permanent impairment, if they're not going to recover, if they're not going to respond to treatment, if they're not going to return to pre-injury function, why not declare the examinee to be permanent and stationary earlier and then provide the permanent impairment rating? But no, in California, it's a double-edged sword, because the medical costs are high, the medical treatments are protracted, and then examinees go on to receive a permanent impairment rating, which leads to a permanent disability award, and California leads the nation in the frequency of permanent disability claims. And today we're going to talk about accuracy in the permanent impairment rating. It seems that permanent disability awards can be largely traced to overinflated and excessive and inaccurate QME permanent impairment ratings. It seems that temporary disability and permanent partial disability benefits, known as the indemnity benefits, are among the highest in the nation. Temporary disability and permanent partial disability. Temporary disability benefits are totaling about $1.6 billion per year in California, and permanent disability benefits are approaching $1.4 billion per year. Now, it's interesting. Some examinees exhaust the temporary disability benefits of 2 years, total duration temporary disability benefits, and then go on to receive a permanent disability award. And for many examinees, not all, but some, but many, are receiving these benefits when they don't truly and actually qualify for those benefits. And today we're talking about accuracy in the disability rating, or the impairment rating. Almost 1/5 of indemnity claims involve cumulative trauma injury, more than doubling. So it's important as a qualified medical evaluator, when you receive the request for a qualified medical evaluation, it's important that you determine the big picture of your case. You know, through the RAND study and the WCIRB study, that if the case involves a cumulative trauma claim, especially a post-employment cumulative trauma claim, well, the RAND study tells us that a large preponderance of these post-employment cumulative trauma claims are driven by what the RAND Corporation defines as intentionally fraudulent acts. So when you realize the big picture in advance, it gives you the opportunity to review the case and to report on the case as the case actually is. If the case is driven by intentionally fraudulent acts, why would you as a qualified medical evaluator then opine for temporary disability benefits? Why would you opine for a permanent impairment rating when the big picture of the case is telling you that perhaps this is an examinee that doesn't qualify for those benefits in the first place? Okay, so it's important that you see the big picture in helping you arrive at opinions and conclusions that are accurate. Okay? California indemnity claim frequency is more than 2/3 higher than the countrywide mean. California, it seems that examinees qualify for temporary disability and permanent disability when the same examinee in another state, in 49 other states, would not qualify for either of those benefits. So these benefits can be traced to poor medical decision making on the part of primary treating physicians and then also on qualified medical evaluators. Why would examinees in California, why would those claims involve temporary disability and permanent disability in California when the same claim qualifies for neither of those benefits in Hawaii, in Nebraska, in Arkansas, in Arizona, in Washington, and in 49 other states? Only in California are examinees receiving these benefits at such a frequency. California leads the nation with more than 2/3 higher the frequency than the countrywide mean. California has by far the highest permanent partial disability claim frequency in the country because qualified medical evaluators are overrating examinees for permanent partial disability. What could the reasons be that examinees are qualifying for permanent partial disability in California but not in other states? What could the reasons for that be? Are the injuries in California more severe? No. Is medical treatment in California incompetent and substandard? No. What could the reasons be? The reasons are that the qualified medical evaluator is providing nonchalant and cavalier and inaccurate permanent impairment ratings. And today we're talking about accuracy in permanent impairment ratings. California has the highest proportion of indemnity claims open at 60 months. 60 months. At more than 3 times the comparison state median. So would you please declare your examinees to be permanent and stationary? Why would a claim go on for 60 months? It's because the examinee has not yet been declared permanent and stationary. It's because the examinee is receiving what the WCIRB refers to as a prolonged pattern of medical treatments. And apparently these medical treatments aren't helping because those same examinees are going on to receive permanent disability ratings. So go ahead and declare these examinees to be permanent and stationary. If they're not going to get any better, more and more medical treatment is not going to allow them to get any better than they otherwise would. Finally, California has a high proportion of permanent disability and cumulative injury claims, and we've talked about this already. So it's important that you see the case for what it is so that you can get the big picture of the case going into your evaluation so that you can provide opinions and conclusions that are accurate. That are accurate, number one, for the examinee, and number two, that are accurate for the system as a whole in the state of California. So when it comes to permanent impairment ratings and accuracy in permanent impairment ratings, I want to talk to you about a couple things. I want to talk to you about, first of all, assessing the examinee's credibility through the use of the activities of daily living assessment. And then I want to talk to you about the filters of substantial medical evidence. Substantial medical evidence as it relates to, number one, your permanent impairment rating, and then substantial medical evidence as it relates to your Alvarez and Guzman alternative impairment rating. And through the use of activities of daily living assessment and through the use of the principles involved in substantial medical evidence, these principles serve as filters through which your permanent impairment rating must pass. And what comes out of the bottom of the filters will be an accurate permanent impairment rating. We're seeing that many qualified medical evaluators that are providing opinions on permanent impairment are artificially overinflated and escalated and are not accurate, and many of these opinions on permanent impairment cannot be upheld by the trier of fact because they cannot pass through the truth filters of the activities of daily living assessment and the truth filters of substantial medical evidence, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. This is going to be a fascinating discussion for you. Okay, so first of all, with regards to activities of daily living, I want to refer to the AMA guides, pages 4 and 5. So if you have your AMA guides, you can turn to pages 4 and 5. The activities of daily living that we assess in our evaluation, those are listed in a table on page 4. But I want to read to you what the AMA guides have to say on page 5. And they're talking here about the impact of the injury on activities of daily living. They tell us on page 5, a 0%, and let me just show this to you so that you can see where it's coming from. This is coming from page 5, the lower right. I have it highlighted right here in the bottom in yellow. This is coming from down here on page 5. You can see here on page 4 is the table of the different activities of daily living that we assess. So on page 5 it says a 0% whole person impairment rating, 0%, no permanent impairment, is assigned to an individual with an impairment. With an impairment, they have an impairment, but we give those persons a 0% impairment rating if the impairment has no significant organ or body system functional consequences and does not limit the performance of the common activities of daily living indicated in table 1.2. So when there's no impact on activities of daily living, doesn't matter what the impairment is. If the impairment does not limit activities of daily living, the guides tell us that that qualifies for a 0% impairment rating. So I'm asking you, would you please provide accurate ratings? If you have an examinee who does not have impact on their activities of daily living, that's a 0% impairment rating. Do you have the courage to provide a 0% impairment rating? It's important that you do an assessment of the activities of daily living and find out, does the examinee have limitations to activities of daily living? And if you do an assessment of the activities of daily living in the face-to-face interview on an interactive basis, you're going to discover that very few examinees actually have limitations with activities of daily living. Now, on the other hand, a 90 to 100% whole person impairment rating indicates a very severe organ or body system impairment, requiring the individual to be fully dependent on others for self-care, approaching death. Now, I've spoken on this in the past, and we have videos available for you on this topic. But let's just talk briefly about your activities of daily living assessment. Now, many doctors do not do an activities of daily living assessment in the face-to-face evaluation with examinees. Doctors use a variety of different methods to assess activities of daily living deficits. In my opinion, the only way to assess for deficits in activities of daily living is interactively in the face-to-face evaluation. Because as we discussed in earlier videos, examinees will overstate and will exaggerate their limitations to activities of daily living. The AMA guides tell us that as many as 50% of examinees, every other examinee, believes that it's okay, it's okay to exaggerate on compensation claims. It's just the nature of the beast. So you can expect examinees to subjectively overstate their limitations to activities of daily living. Therefore, you must assess them interactively in the face-to-face evaluation to get the true limitations to activities of daily living. This cannot be done through the use of a checkbox form. If you use a checkbox form, you must follow up on all of the examinee's responses interactively to pursue the true limitations in activities of daily living. And what you're going to find is that most examinees, despite what they say subjectively, they have no limitations. You'll find this out. You'll discuss with them interactively. Mrs. Jones, do you have any limitations with self-care and personal hygiene? Do you have any limitations using the bathroom for urination? Do you have any limitations using the bathroom for defecation? And they will tell you, oh yes, I have pain when I sit down on the toilet seat to defecate. Okay, this is what you'll hear. This is the common limitation that examinees will tell you. I have pain when I sit down on the toilet seat to defecate, and I get pain in my back when I bear down to defecate. Now, first of all, this is an activity upon which you as the qualified medical evaluator have no way to objectively verify. It's a purely subjective statement. But the follow-up question to this description is, oh, okay, Mrs. Jones, I understand. But are you able to use the toilet to defecate? Or do you have to have help? Or do you require assistance? And most examinees will tell you, oh, no, I mean, I do it just fine. It's just that I have pain. And pain is not the same as a deficit. We're after deficits with activities of daily living. We're not after pain with activities of daily living. We're after deficits with activities of daily living. And the AMA guides tell us that for examinees that have no limitations with activities of daily living, a 0% whole person impairment rating applies. What are some other activities of daily living? Examinees will tell you that they have difficulty with sexual function. So for a male examinee, sexual function involves erection, involves ejaculation, and involves the sex act itself. So, Mr. Jones, as a result of your injury, do you have any limitations with erection? Yes, because of my injury, I'm not able to achieve a full erection. Do you have any limitation with ejaculation? Yes, because of my injury, I have difficulty in achieving ejaculation. Okay, I understand. Because of your injury, do you have any limitation or deficit with having sex? Yes, because of my back pain, I have limitations with sex. We have to employ different positions and different modifications in order to be able to have sex. Okay, Mr. Jones, I understand. Now, number one, these are statements that are completely subjective. There's no way for you as a qualified medical evaluator to go into their bedroom or into their home and assess erection, and assess ejaculation, and assess sexual activity. And remember that the AMA guides tell us that as many as 50% of examinees will exaggerate their limitations to activities of daily living. So the follow-up question is, okay, Mr. Jones, I understand. Let me ask you, are you able to have sex? Are you able to have sex? And the examinee will tell you, well, yes, I mean, it's not the way it was before, is what they'll tell you. And the follow-up question is, I understand. Are you able to have sex? Are you having sex? And they'll tell you that, yes, I'm having sex, and the fact that they're having sex indicates that they have no deficit in sexual activity. Most examinees on close questioning will reveal that they have no deficits to activities of daily living. What about traveling, riding and driving a car? Mr. Jones, are you able to drive your car? Oh yes, but I have to get out every 30 minutes to stretch my back. Is this something that can be objectively verified? I'll tell you what can be objectively verified. More objectively verifiable than the fact that they have to get out every 30 minutes or every 1 hour or every 100 miles to stretch. More objectively verified is whether or not they drove themselves to the evaluation. See, you're looking for what's truly objective, not what's truly subjective. And on an objective basis with regards to activities of daily living, excuse me, most examinees have no limitations with activities of daily living. And these are examinees that qualify for a 0% impairment rating. Do you have the courage to provide a 0% impairment rating? Do you have the courage to do that? It applies in many, many of your cases, but the purpose of this program is to elucidate that qualified medical evaluators overrate and overstate permanent impairment. Most examinees qualify for either low or no permanent impairment rating because they have no deficits to activities of daily living despite their subjective reports of pain with various activities. So the activities of daily living assessment must be done in the face-to-face evaluation. Okay, so there's the first component of arriving at accurate permanent impairment ratings is to do an activities of daily living assessment in the face-to-face evaluation. If you do this on an interactive basis and pursue positive responses by the examinee, you'll discover that what they're mostly reporting to you is pain during activities, and pain during activities is not the same as limitations or deficits with activities. The AMA guides provide for permanent impairment ratings for deficits of activities of daily living. Where there are no deficits, the AMA guides assign a 0% impairment rating. I suspect if more examinees were more accurately rated at 0% impairment rating, that California might be in a little bit better condition. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you about when it comes to your permanent impairment ratings has to do with the concept of substantial medical evidence. I love the topic of substantial medical evidence because substantial medical evidence basically is a series of filters through which your opinion must pass. If your opinion is not able to pass through the filters, in other words, it gets stuck and clogged in the filters, the reason it gets stuck and clogged is because it's not true. It's not true. Only true, accurate, and correct opinions will pass through the various filters and fall out the bottom of the funnel as a substantial opinion. Okay? So with opinions, we take our opinions and we pour them in the top of the funnel. We can pour all kinds of opinions in the top of a funnel. But opinions that fall out of the bottom of the funnel after passing through filters, those are opinions that qualify as substantial opinions. So opinions as substantial opinions are completely different cats. They're completely different types of opinions. Now, doctors are great at offering opinions. Doctors are not so great at qualifying their opinions as substantial opinions. And substantial opinions are opinions that are true. Substantial opinions are opinions that are accurate. Substantial opinions are opinions that are actual, that are appropriate, that apply. But many doctors provide overinflated and overstated opinions that aren't substantial medical evidence. So let's talk about substantial medical evidence. Substantial medical evidence has been described in many landmark cases. The McAllister case tells us that a medical opinion, in order to be a substantial opinion, must be framed in terms of reasonable medical probability. Reasonable medical probability. That tells us that the opinion has more than a 51% likelihood of being correct. So when you offer your opinion, you need to think about it for a second and frame that opinion in terms of reasonable medical probability. And you need to ask yourself, is this opinion more likely than not? Is there a 51% chance or greater that this is a correct opinion? Or is this just an opinion that you're throwing up against the wall to see if it'll stick? No. It has to be reasonably medically probably correct. A greater likelihood than not of being correct. The Heglin case tells us that a medical opinion is not substantial medical evidence if it is based on facts no longer germane, if it's based on an inadequate medical history or examination. And I have a case I'm going to share with you here in just a minute where the agreed medical evaluator provided an opinion that was not based on an adequate examination. And if I was a defense attorney and I wanted to attack your permanent impairment rating, I would go right to the physical examination and I would prove that your physical examination does not support your permanent impairment rating. So that's something you want to consider in making your opinion substantial, is that your physical examination findings support the permanent impairment rating. It's not substantial if it's based on incorrect legal theories or on surmise, conjecture, speculation, or guess. The next best way to prove that an opinion is not substantial is just to show that the doctor is making this stuff up. And he's basing his opinion on conjecture and guess. The Granado case tells us that a medical report is not substantial medical evidence unless it sets forth the reasoning behind the physician's opinion, not merely his or her conclusion. And this is where the great bulk of doctors fail. QMEs fail in providing substantial opinions because they fail to set forth the reasoning behind the opinion. QMEs are great at giving the opinion, but they're weak in providing the reasons that support the opinion. And aren't the reasons the real crux of the opinion? When someone gives you an opinion, don't you ask them, well, why do you say that? Or upon what is that based? Or what is your reference for that? Or why do you say that? Don't you ask for an elaboration of reasons? And don't you assess the reasons for their reasonable probability of being correct? Yes, you do. And guess what? The parties are doing that with your opinions and conclusions as well. So when you set forth a permanent impairment rating, you must set forth the reasons that support your rating. If you can provide compelling and voluminous reasons, it's likely that that permanent impairment rating is correct, is accurate, because it's supported by voluminous and compelling reasons. And I'll share with you a couple of permanent impairment ratings where the doctor failed to provide the reasons. Zemke tells us that a mere legal conclusion does not furnish a basis for a finding. An opinion that fails to disclose its underlying basis and gives a bare legal conclusion does not constitute substantial medical evidence. The Bassett case says the chief value of an expert's testimony rests upon the material from which his or her opinion is fashioned. The material, this usually is based upon the review of your records, your physical exam findings, your diagnostic study findings, the material from which his or her opinion is fashioned, and the reasoning by which he or she progresses from the material to the conclusion. Thus, the opinion of an expert is no better than the reasons upon which it is based. Finally, the Escobedo case tells us that a medical opinion must be framed in terms of reasonable medical probability. It must not be speculative. It must be based upon pertinent facts. Pertinent facts. And the more voluminous and the more compelling are your pertinent facts, the more likely it is that your opinion and conclusion is actually correct. Doesn't that make sense? Many doctors provide opinions and conclusions that are based upon no facts whatsoever. It's just a conclusory opinion. It must be based on an adequate history and an examination, and it must set forth the reasons in support of its conclusion. So when you provide your permanent impairment rating, you will know that your permanent impairment rating is true, actual, accurate, and applicable when you can support it with voluminous and compelling reasons based upon your materials, including your review of records, your adequate examination, and your facts, and pertinent facts that support the opinion and conclusion. And doesn't that make sense? And you can spot a permanent impairment rating that's not based on facts, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, and these inaccurate permanent impairment ratings are contributing to the poor condition of the California workers' compensation system. Now, every opinion and conclusion that you offer in your QME report must be supported by substantial medical evidence. So every time you offer an opinion and conclusion, you must set forth a series of bullet points wherein you list the reasons, wherein you list the facts, wherein you list the material upon which your opinion and conclusion is based, and wherein you progress from the material to the conclusion. And you show the parties your cards. You show them your hand. You show them your thought process. Everybody wants to know, what did the QME say? What did he say? Well, here it is where you show them what you're saying. And the more compelling and the more voluminous are your facts and reasons, the more likely that your opinion and conclusion is actually correct. Okay? Now, with regards to Alvarez and Guzman alternative impairment ratings, qualified medical evaluators apparently love, for whatever reason, to provide alternative impairment ratings under Alvarez and Guzman. Now, in the Alvarez and Guzman cases, they admonish us for trying to provide alternative impairment ratings simply to achieve what they refer to as a better result. Better result, meaning a higher impairment rating. Well, if not to achieve a better result, qualified medical evaluators would never provide alternative impairment ratings. It seems that qualified medical evaluators have some compulsion, some incentive, some motivation to try to provide higher permanent impairment ratings. Well, the problem comes in supporting those higher ratings. And the Guzman line of cases tells us that when we provide an alternative impairment rating, not only does our first impairment rating, the strict impairment rating, have to qualify as substantial medical evidence, but the alternative impairment rating must qualify for its own sequence. It must go through its own sequence to qualify as substantial medical evidence itself. So, when you provide an alternative impairment rating under Alvarez and Guzman, the alternative impairment rating must be supported by the following steps. Number one, you must first provide a strict impairment rating using the appropriate table, chapter, section within the AMA guides. You cannot just jump to an alternative impairment rating. You must first provide a strict impairment rating according to the AMA guides. Then step number two, you must explain why that strict impairment rating provided for by the AMA guides is not an accurate description of the examinee's true impairment. Now, this is going to be difficult. This step, where you explain why the strict rating is not accurate, this is called rebutting the guides. If you're going to try and rebut the guides, your reasoning better be good. If you're going to try and rebut the Bible, okay, the authors of the Bible, your reasoning better be good. And many qualified medical evaluators are not successfully able to rebut the AMA guides because they can't explain why the impairment rating in the guides is not accurate. You can see that that could cause some difficulty. Step number 3, the qualified medical evaluator must provide an alternative impairment rating within the 4 corners of the AMA guides. And then step number 4, the qualified medical evaluator must explain why the alternative rating is the most accurate description of the examinee's true impairment. And this is where most qualified medical evaluators' opinion for an alternative impairment rating fails, because they cannot justify or they cannot explain why the strict rating is not accurate and why the alternative impairment rating is more accurate. And it becomes clear that qualified medical evaluators who are providing an alternative impairment rating are doing so simply to try and satisfy one or more of the parties and are simply trying to achieve a better result. So I want to illustrate these principles with you by sharing with you a couple of actual cases, the Torres and Moulton cases. And I look forward to doing that with you here in just a moment after this brief break.